House Bill 2793, and Revisor Moyer has an amendment. Well, you have an amendment that someone asked you to do. Maybe it was me.
I bet it was.
All right, Jenna, would you mind going over, because it looks pretty heavy duty here. We'll have Jenna go over what this amendment does.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the amendments to this bill would first restrict the provisions of the bill to actions done at a school. And I will make a note that the page 2 is just the balloon with all of the amendments incorporated and the explanatory sections of the excluded citations of law. So we can just kind of go through line by line. It would add a definition of behavioral health crisis and drug, and the definition of healthcare provider would be amended to a person who is licensed or hold a temporary permit to practice by the Board of Healing Arts, the Board of Nursing, or Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. And they also had a definition of school facility, which would be a building or structure that's owned, operated, or maintained by the Board of Education of a public school or a governing body of an accredited non-public school, which would cover your private schools but not home schools, and if that facility is accessible to students. Subsection B1 would now read, except as provided in subsection C, notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, unless a healthcare provider has the consent of a minor's parent, a healthcare provider shall not, while the minor or the healthcare provider is at a school facility, prescribe, dispense, or administer any prescription or non-prescription drug, administer a diagnostic test with the minor's bodily fluids, or conduct ongoing behavioral treatment. And then there's a balloon added, this would be in line 26, that the provisions of paragraph 1 shall not prevent a healthcare provider from conducting a behavioral health assessment or intervention for a minor who is experiencing a behavioral health crisis, conducting those school-based screenings required by law. Those would be the things like the hearing and the scoliosis, things like that, or providing education. That language of 2 would stay the same about the professional discipline. And then the provisions of this section shall not apply to, and then if you look to the second page, it lays out each of those, which would be consent by a parent for surgery and procedures on a child, consent for medical care of a pregnant minor, donation of blood by persons over 16, consent for immunization by persons other than a parent, health services under the revised Kansas Code for Care of Children, emergency care by healthcare providers, and then examination and treatment of persons under 18 for venereal disease and also for drug abuse, misuse, and addiction.
All right, and the other thing, committee, is this bill, as we originally heard it and as we discussed it at the roundtable, was a lot broader than schools. This narrows it down to just be with school facilities. So it brings it back into, I think, what was the original intent of the author, that was Representative Bryce. So.
And I have one more thing. I forgot to mention
Jenna.
that the repealer is also stricken out, so it will no longer repeal other sections of law.
Okay. So I would offer this amendment, second by Representative Bryce. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the revisor under drug means the same as defined in KSA 65-1626. Can you give me kind of the little intention of what drugs we're talking about there? Are those prescription or non, or just what they are?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That definition is from the Pharmacy Act, and it mentions drugs 100 times, so there it is. It is sort of a long definition, but it's one recognized in the United States Pharmacopoeia or other such official compendiums of the United States, or a national formulary that's intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease other than food, intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of humans or other animals. It goes on a little bit about livestock remedies in amygdalin, but essentially it would cover prescription and non-prescription drugs if they're sold as a drug that's meant to prevent, cure, or diagnose, treat any disease in humans.
So it would include your prescription drugs and your over-the-counter.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Sometimes you regret asking the question.
Jenna's got the answers, trust me. Committee, are there further questions, discussion on the amendment? Representing McDonald.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to read and keep up. Can you help me understand, like, with the school nurse and their concerns, when it talked, in the original bill about anything they do in their job is practicing medicine, basically. Does this address that concern, and if so, how?
Jenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't give an opinion as to whether it addresses that concern, but this bill would only prohibit a school nurse from prescribing, dispensing, or administering drugs, administering a diagnostic test with the minor's bodily fluids, so things like blood work or a strep test, or conducting ongoing behavioral health treatment, which would be limited to those behavioral health treatment providers, so that most likely the licensee is the BSRB. So the concerns about the initial exam or cleaning out a wound from the playground, that should not be prohibited by the language that's now in B1.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up, like with our mental health intervention teams, and that behavioral health piece gives me a little pause because it's kind of broad, and we do have counselors that might see a child in an ongoing fashion for any number of things, and it might come out later that, I guess maybe a counselor would see a child with parent permission. Is that the distinction?
Yes. Yeah, so like in the MHIT program, that all has to be done by parental consent. A child cannot become a part of that program without it. And, we've talked to several individuals since last week of trying to deal with the behavioral health side of things, because actually with a mental health provider, they can start talking to a child, and you could consider that treatment, because they may be trying to figure out, is this child in crisis? What is this child dealing with? Why are they, whatever might be going on with them. So that's different than administering meds and stuff. Does that help?
It helps a little. What if a school counselor, for instance, is trying to assess whether or not someone's being abused? Like, does that constitute an emergency? Would that be an exception in this case? Because that's kind
I'm
of
not sure that that would be, I'm not sure that that would be treatment. Jenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That trying to figure out whether someone has been abused or neglected would fall under the exception in 382217, when a child less than 18 years of age is alleged to have been physically, mentally, or emotionally abused or neglected. No consent shall be required to medically examine that child to determine whether they've been abused or neglected.
Okay, so I guess and you might have answered this, I just want to ask it one more time to make sure. In the process of trying to figure out whether or not they have been, that is kind of that triage situation I'm talking about. So I hear you say if they've been, then yes, absolutely, that's not going to apply to all of this. But if so often in medicine and in counseling, you're trying to get to what's wrong, right? And so that does take a little bit of treatment, maybe, if that's your definition. I just don't want unintended consequences to happen because someone's trying. I don't want a counselor to hesitate to intervene because they worry they might get, their license revoked or something.
Jenna.
It may also be helpful to read the definition of behavioral health crisis that's referenced from KSA 65536. So this would be one of the things that would not be prevented. It would be behavioral and conduct issues that impact the safety or health of a juvenile, members of the juvenile's family or members of the community. That would include non-life-threatening mental health and substance abuse concerns. So a healthcare professional at a school would be allowed to conduct a behavioral health assessment or intervention for a minor who's experiencing, who is in mental health crisis.
Thank you.
Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want a point of clarification. So, and Jenna, you can probably provide this. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So as long as a parent or a guardian has given, and then I have a couple questions now that I said guardian. Does it matter that it says minor's parent compared to guardian on giving consent for like Tylenol, ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve, those types of things? Should we put something in there that says guardian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The definition of parent in 38141 that's referenced includes a step-parent, guardian, or conservator, whoever is by law liable to maintain, care, and support that child. So that definition includes parent, guardian, conservator, et cetera.
Okay, so then sorry, one more question. So then, as long as consent is given, then they can do the ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve, as long as there's something there.
Correct.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Representative Reese.
So does this bill supersede any consents that a school district would already, or individual schools would already get? Or is this on top of? In addition to, maybe?
If a school has received consent from a parent, then this prohibition would not apply. So if you sign a form at the beginning of the year that says the school nurse can give out Advil and the parent signs it, then they can give out Advil regardless of what this says. So
if this-
language in here, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just trying to find the exact language. While the minor is at school, unless they have the consent of the parent.
Yeah, so if they have a consent today, that consent's still good. This doesn't override any consents that's been signed.
But does this consent a school might have cover everything this bill does?
That would depend on the language of the consent. I'm not familiar with what school districts currently or would choose to have as consent forms in the future.
We could mandate a consent form if you'd like to, Representative Reese.
No, no. I know. No, I mean, because I'm going to say again what I said before. I think this was a knee-jerk response, and if we could just work with the school districts to make sure that their consents are comprehensive and that are done, we don't need this bill.
Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And because we took that extra step to have the roundtable, do you have that information of did anyone switch from their opponent to proponent testimony with these changes?
I haven't talked to them.
So this amendment was created without the approval of folks who gave testimony on February 15th?
Well, there were a few that I reached out to as I was working through this, yes. But I didn't ask them if they supported the bill now or they didn't support the bill.
Okay, so we don't know who's okay with these changes? Is this is feedback, right? And, okay.
What's feedback?
That this amendment is the feedback that you've heard from the roundtable.
During the
and hearing.
roundtable.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, because as we were going through that, I was writing down names and what their objections were, what their concerns were. And so as I worked through this, then with the help of Revisor Moyer, was reaching out to these different individuals, including Representative Bryce.
Okay, thank you.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more quick thing, and this may be addressed with the changes. It's kind of hard for me to tell. In one of our opponent testimonies, it said that the bill probably implicitly repeals KSA 38123B, which allows a minor ages 16 to 17 to consent to his or her own medical care when no parent or guardian is immediately available. Is that addressed here?
Revisor Moyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That section is not touched by the bill. Based upon the prohibition being restricted to schools, a minor would still, as they are now, be able to consent to other care at a place that is outside of a school like they can under current law.
But if I always get my acronyms wrong. If a health clinic is operating within a school and a parent is unavailable to get contacted, that might apply. Am I wrong?
In that context, if a health clinic were operating within a school, yes, they would have to get consent of a parent unless it fell within one of the exceptions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we did come up with an example in 501 Topeka. They actually have a, was it an FQHC that 501's using to carte blanche for their school district, so that's why that's included in there. And it was actually a individual from an FQHC that caused the discussion of the girl receiving birth control pills after a nurse prescribed them.
Was that recently? In recent years, or do you know when it was?
Representative Bryce?
The patient I believe we're referring to was hormone shots for contraception, and it was about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments on the amendment? All right, seeing none, I'll move my motion to adopt the amendments to House Bill 2793. Second, it was already seconded by Representative Bryce. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Is there further discussions, comments, questions on the bill? Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a motion that we amend this bill by taking Senate Bill 287 and replacing its contents with the contents of this amended bill today, 2793, and designating it as a substitute bill, for Senate Bill 287.
Motion made by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Bryce. Discussion on the Epley motion? Representative Reese.
What's the purpose of the gutting?
Well, with the time frame and constraints that we're dealing with, this gives the ability to, I believe, move this quicker through the conference process should they decide to make amendments, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Epley, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I close and move that we pass out House Bill, or substitute for Senate Bill 287.
You've heard the motion by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Bryce. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. All right, committee, as of right now, and this is our last week for us to hold hearings, work bills, and get them out of this committee. So that's why things are kind of popping up here at the last minute. Right now, we don't have anything for tomorrow. Wednesday, we will have the Medicaid hearing, and then we'll see what happens on Thursday and Friday. So we are adjourned until, right now, until Wednesday, but everything's on the call of the chair, so. Oh, and Wednesday's meeting starts at 1 o'clock, folks. So if everybody could get here, early, a little bit early, including myself, because I have a tendency to get behind schedule on things, so we can promptly start at 1, so we can give everybody an opportunity to be heard and give us plenty of times to be able to ask questions and receive answers back. So